Anthropic suspended an entire 110-person company's Claude account all at once on a Monday morning without any warning. While the team was locked out, their API keys kept billing. They couldn't even view their own usage data because their email addresses had been banned. So here's a second company that hits the exact same pattern in the same month. I studied both incidents against Anthropic's commercial terms. I found 4 structured reasons that makes this failure repeatable by possibly anyone. And all of them are written in the terms every Cloud API customer has already signed. At the end of this, you also learned the 3 most practical ways to manage the risk recommended by a whole community of CTOs. But first, the incident. Because the part that should concern you isn't just the suspension, but what happened the moment the account was locked. The incident. Monday started like any ordinary day for this 100 staff company. The first sign of the trouble appear, however, is in their Slack operational channel. One person posted a screenshot showing that they have trouble accessing Claude. Then another. Within 10 minutes, people across the company were asking the same question. What happens to my Claude account? The answer surfaced quickly. It was not just one person's Claude account. Everyone's Claude account has been suspended. This company is a US-based agriculture tech company. The original poster on Reddit says the company used both Claude teams and a separate build API account, suggesting Claude was used not only through the internal teams, but also through the API-based workflows. The OP also described Claude as part of the company's daily workflows and mentions agriculture-related conversations involving fertilizer, GPS satellites, and other agriculture-related topics. More and more, the company comes to depend on Claude. And then Anthropic cut everything off. Just like that, 11 and 10 accounts were suspended all at the same time. No warning, no explanation. The funny thing is that Anthropic didn't send the company admin a notice. Instead, they sent out 110 separate ones. Each email was addressed personally to the individual about their account. It's hard to imagine how, when those 100 people received the email, they probably sat there with the same private thought, what did I do? Nobody told them it was a company-wide ban. So, at first, same as everyone else, the OP thought it must be something that he'd done. The email was addressed to him and the link went to a Google form for an individual appeal. He started searching his own recent activity for a trigger. Was it the conversation about fertilizer? Maybe because it's the same ingredients as bomb? Or maybe because it's the GPS satellite? Or any agriculture-related topics that may have looked wrong to an automated system. He had just no idea to know what was going on. It wasn't until his colleagues started to compare notes on Slack that then the picture became clear. The entire organization had been blocked at once. So they submitted the Google form, then reached out through every possible channel that they could find, including DMing an Anthropic employee who commented on a similar case on Reddit. No reply after 12 hours. 24 hours passed, still no reply. 36 hours passed. Still nothing. Then came the absurd part. Because the company didn't only have a Claude team plan, remember? It still had a separate build API account under the same administrators. So the API keys kept working. A renewal bill even arrived, but because the admin's email addresses has been banned, they couldn't even log into the portal to view the usage or to dispute the case. By the time this post went up to Reddit, access still hadn't been restored. 110 people company just sit still. And what's concerning is not only the suspension itself, but this pattern, the automated enforcements, the vague email, the generic appeal route, and no immediate business support when all other attempts failed. And what should concern you is that this isn't a one-off event. Another company had already been hit in a much similar way. Not long before, Pato Manila, a CTO of a fintech company, posted on X that Anthropic has taken down his entire organization, 60 plus headcounts, without explanation. He shared this email that Anthropic has sent. It's saying, our automated system detected a high volume of signals associated to your account which violate our usage policy, blah, blah, blah. As a result, we have revoked your access to Claude. So this is something to remember because we'll talk about it later in the video, that they have emphasized the human reviewed the decision and agreed with the machine's recommendation. Only later did Anthropic confirm that this whole suspensions was false positive. Access was then restored. But 60 people were locked out. They couldn't do their work. The integration, the conversation history, or even the internal processes of their team ran on were all either gone or on indefinite hold. It's just hard to believe that only these two companies has somehow managed to slip through the cracks of Anthropic's enterprise support. They are more likely, however, on the exact same standard plan that anyone, maybe you and me, have clicked through when setting up Claude team or API account. If this happens to your team, you would receive the same email, the same form, and the same silence treatment, which raised an obvious question. What does the standard deal actually say? It turns out Anthropic gave those companies almost nothing to begin with, and not for the reason you'd expect. I went and read the terms. The terms are actually more protective than you would expect from reading the evidence by those two companies. For individual users on Claude.ai, Anthropic can just terminate your access like this. Here's what they say in their terms and conditions. We believe that you have materially breached these terms. We must do so in order to comply with an applicable laws, or immediate suspensions or terminations is necessary for security reasons, and therefore we cannot provide notice. The commercial terms go further. Anthropic may suspend a customer if Anthropic reasonably believes or determines that the customer or any user is using the service in violation of section D1, D2, and D4. They are respectively the following: if you didn't follow the law, or if you didn't follow Anthropic's policy, and this one, if you directly compete with Anthropic. Repeat, in their suspension clause, they said don't compete with Anthropic. This is very important to keep in mind because this is something I believe is important enough for me to discuss in my future work. Then comes the liability clause. Anthropic will have no liability for any damage, liabilities, losses, including any loss of data or profit, or any other consequence that consumers may incur because of a service suspension. So that was standard platform language. Same as this, in terms of the notice and when it comes to restoring your account, it says Anthropic will use reasonable effort to provide written notice of any service suspension to customers. Yes, a tiny bit of notice obligation. It's really soft, but it's kind of there. So if your company have ever bothered to read those commercial terms, you will actually realize that they can suspend your entire organization while they keep billing your API account and refuse to respond for X hours or even days and still owe you nothing. That's all documented, which those two companies that got suspended, and you did too when you clicked the accept button to continue use their service. Not to mention, these two firms are too small for Anthropic to even care about. That's why they wouldn't have a tailored SLA, nor a account manager, nor a dedicated escalation path that didn't go through a form. 4 structure failures. So let's be precise about what actually failed here, because the story isn't simply that Anthropic made a bad call. Failure number 1, no granularity. When Anthropic automated and then flagged a violation, the consequence is binary because the whole organization goes dark. It's either all or nothing. If there is ever a careless intern, an automated system misread a conversation about fertilizer as a bomb ingredient, that's it. Anthropic doesn't care if AI is used for your internal team only or also on the live platform serving your customers. Failure number 2, no enterprise escalation path. The appeal process for a 100 people business is a Google form with no priority queue. These accounts are treated exactly the same as an individual user. It says a lot about how Anthropic sees its real customers, enterprise with large orders. Now, I hope it tells you everything about how Anthropic sees its real customers. That will be enterprises with large orders. At Anthropic's burn rate, it only matters if your entire year's spend register more significantly than the rounding error on the revenue sheet. And failure 3, no liability. As we talked about, Anthropic's term has eliminated the liability, which means any potential revenue lost while your team was locked out. I hate to disclose it to you, but it's not their problem. It is, though, worth asking why, or say worth reconsidering if the loss is something you can bear. It's simply math about a lack of incentive. A company that carries liability for mistakes has a financial reason to prevent them. However, in this case, Anthropic just doesn't carry that liability. So apart from them losing you as their loyal customer and maybe getting some tiny stance on their reputation, by the way, which AI companies are well reputed anyways, it costs them no actual harm because none of them register on their balance sheet. So until now, you should realize that you're absorbing the cost of whatever mistakes, either by you being careless or them, whatever reasons are. Failure number 4, no human in the loop. After Claude code source being leaked in March 26, Boris Cherny, Anthropic's lead engineer on Claude code, first admitted here, saying 100% of my contribution to Claude code was written by Claude code. And then he also acknowledged that the packaging error that caused the leak, and then said, the counterintuitive answer is to solve the problem by finding ways to go faster, rather than introducing more process. On top of that, a public Claude issue tracker found that somewhere between 49% to 71% of all issue closure were automated. So in plain English, the product writes, monitors, and fixes itself. So when something breaks, the answer is not to include humans in the loop to fix it because they trust bots to fix the crack. This mindset could get away if they run this as a small-scale experiment, but no, the comment was right after a major leak of their flagship product. The engineer's public response wasn't that we need better review, instead, we need to move faster and let AI check AI's work. If this is how they respond to a serious breach, I wouldn't be surprised if people's accounts got randomly suspended because there was no investigation. From triggering the ban to review it to lift the ban, all were done by bots. Now you may say, fine, I will just switch back to OpenAI or I will use Gemini. But is it that simple? Is this maybe a standard AI company's playbook? And naturally, I decided to investigate more. I pulled the equivalent suspension terms from OpenAI and Google. And here's the short version. While Google's Gemini API terms didn't mention suspension, this is written on their general API page. Google may suspend access to APIs by you or your API client without notice if we reasonably believe that you are in violation of the terms. And here's what OpenAI says in their business terms, which are more specifically, surprisingly, says if an end user violates an agreement or potentially will cause a security emergency, then OpenAI may request that customers suspend or terminate the related end user account. If customers fail to promptly suspend or terminate the end user account, then OpenAI may do so. The organization doesn't go dark automatically. Anthropic has no equivalent clause. As you can see, they're all in the same direction in terms of account suspension. So you're tied up now, and you don't have an alternative? Not quite. Here's something real and concrete for you. So, are you kidnapped by AI companies? Yes, the speed of which businesses are embedding AI tools is outrunning anyone's procurement or ISO checklist. I ran this past a few CTO groups and received some interesting comments and advice. So I'm dumping those I believe that make sense. Some are just really good practice. Others are unique to this new world where a single vendor has such an outsized impact on your organization. Counterplay number 1, designed for unreliability. The full rug pull is the extreme version, but Claude's status page has lit up like a Christmas tree lately. If you cannot do your job without Claude being available, consider how much money would a downtime cost you. Now you have a budget to figure out alternative. One of the obvious alternatives is self-hosting models. We are getting to a point where hosting on AWS or Azure or even a top-line Mac is feasible. It's not going to be a frontier model yet, but for many agent tasks, it's plenty powerful. More control, better availability, and less token budget worries if you're running on your own hardware. If whatever task you're running on is so critical to your organization, the cost of this control might be worth it. Now, counterplay number 2. Limit the blast radius. We just can't avoid talking about blast radius when it comes to agents. Blast radius is, simply put, the impact on your organization when something goes wrong. One agent handles your entire workflow, has a much larger individual blast radius compared to 10 agents completing the same workflow. In fact, there's a good chance that of those 10 agents that are working on your workflow, 8 are better off with a standard bit of a script, and there are only 2 steps in there that need LLM access. Counterplay number 3, keep data separated. And finally, agents, of course, need data. Without getting on my data privacy and sovereignty soapbox, it's worth considering where your data is stored and how it's accessed. Having file uploaded to Claude is miles harder to untangle than having access to a directory on your computer. Well, I hope you like this kind of analysis and watch this one next. Don't forget to subscribe.